This is the Tropic Pianist Gamers podcast, episode 46. Today I'm joined by Bev. Bev, would you like to introduce yourself properly?
Hi there, everybody. I'm Dr. Bev Taylor, and I am a chartered psychologist and a menopause and wellbeing trainer.
And today's episode is all about the menopause. So, you're a menopause trainer. What got you into that in the first place? What led you to that?
So I've been incredibly fortunate to have a very varied career, shall we say. But in my early 20s, like quite a long time ago, because I'm now in my 40s, I was fortunate enough to work on a menopause treatment trial down for King's College London. And I was one of the team who looked at CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, as a treatment for hot flushes and night sweats. And that basically started this passion for menopause because the stories we heard then are very sadly the stories we still hear now about menopause, about women not being able to access the treatment they want, not understanding what it is, starting to Google, dementia and brain cancers and things like this because of the changes they were seeing in their 40s. I really thought this would have changed in the last kind of decade or so,
Yeah.
but sadly, it just hasn't. And so I'm still very passionate about it, as you can probably tell as we go through the questions today. But since that time, I then moved around and I've kind of moved all over the country and things. But I've worked either in workplaces where I've helped to develop menopause policies and bring menopause support into the workplace, or I've also worked in a menopause app as a menopause coach and health and lifestyle and behaviour change trainer. And now I work for myself doing lots of different kind of awareness raising and coaching of menopause and supporting women educationally around the menopause.
Cool. So, menopause. I was talking to you before we recorded about me not being old enough to experience the menopause, but that's actually not true, is it?
No, this isn't a thing. Like any of us could go through menopause. I mean, it's rare, but there are occasions of people in their teens and 20s and 30s going through menopause. Um, and menopause basically means the ending of our menstrual cycles. But
Hmm.
actually, what happens before that is more important than that end date. So, to explain a little bit, menopause is basically so the doctors will have said you've gone through the menopause when you've not had a period for 1 year.
Hmm.
But actually, when you hit the perimenopausal phase, which is kind of usually in our 40s, for some women it's in the 30s or late 30s, but for many of us it's kind of as we turn 40 or those early kind of 40s years, we start to see changes. So we might start to see changes in our cycle length. So say you were a religiously 28 dayer and now all of a sudden we're like 30 odd days, or sometimes it's 26 and now it's like 40 odd, and that kind of starts to lengthen. So it might be that then in your perimenopause, you might go 3, 4, 5 months, then have a period. Then you might have another one a month later. Then you might not have anything for 6 months or 9 months. And we go on like that until we've not had a period for a year. We don't really know why the decision was a year, but the medical community have decided this golden kind of once you've not had one for 12 months, you're likely to not have another one again. That said, please use protection during that period because you don't know where you are if you don't want a baby to pop along. Um, but yeah, so there's lots and lots of things that happen during that time and symptoms that crop up. Um, but there isn't actually a thing as not being too young. Sadly, we're just not really taught about that, which I think is really important to us nowadays when many of us actually don't have children until we're in our 30s and 40s. For some of us, we might start to have seen some menopausal changes at the point where we're looking to maybe have children. So it is really important we're educated about this stuff.
Okay, so what's the difference between menopause itself and perimenopause?
So perimenopause is that transitional phase where you're starting to have symptoms. Like I say, can happen anywhere in those kind of early 40s, mid 40s, late 40s. Perimenopause tends to last quite a long time. So, as I say, you might start to get symptoms in your early 40s, and it isn't always cycle changes that are the very first thing. So, it might also be that your periods start to get heavier or lighter than they were before. Or you might start to get a bit of brain fog, where you just can't remember the person that you're talking to name.
Yeah.
Or like you can't remember where you put your car keys. You walk into a room, you can't remember what was I in here for? I mean, I'm a busy working mum of two kids, so
Yeah,
that's my life anyway. You know, I walk into a room, I'm sure I was coming in here for something, but
can
I'm
relate.
wandering
Yeah.
once. And things. So you start to see some of those signs and symptoms come in, and you might get hot flushes, you might get skin changes, you might get a bit of vaginal dryness, your libido might have all of a sudden disappeared. Lots of things happen in perimenopause. And that's actually when many people need the most support.
Yeah.
Menopause itself is that one day from your last menstrual, from 12 months from your last menstrual period, and it only actually lasts one day is menopause. Then you go into postmenopause. Doesn't mean your symptoms will just all of a sudden disappear because it's due to the hormone changes, and we see the hormones go up and down during perimenopause and menopause. Eventually, in postmenopause, they hit a lower kind of level.
Mhm.
Once your hormones hit that lower level, the symptoms start to kind of peter out for most people. Some people do still get symptoms for a long time afterwards, but most people will see once their hormones hit that new baseline lower level, things settle down quite a bit.
Okay, so there's a lot of symptoms and stuff to look out for. What are the most common symptoms and how do they differ between people?
So the most common symptoms are things like hot flushes, although not everybody gets those. They can happen during the day or at night. And they're like feelings of extreme heat that might kind of flush up you through your body from some people from their feet or the tummy or their necks. You can get very red, particularly if you're pale skinned, or you can start to sweat quite visibly on the face. So they can be really embarrassing, particularly if you're at work or you kind of, you're presenting or you're out and about, you're doing things. You can also get those kind of feelings at night and they can wake you up. So they're called night sweats. Some women find themselves so sweaty in the night they have to change their bedclothes, change their nightwear, all sorts of things. We can also, all the common symptoms are the cycle changes, skin and hair changes, so skin going much drier or getting acne back in our 30s and 40s. What's all that about? Then we've got things like brain fog, memory and concentration issues, kind of that foggy feeling in terms of not remembering things, but also kind of struggling to do tasks sometimes. And then we've got a lot of psychological kind of symptoms. So we've got things like depression crops up or low mood, anxiety, particularly for those that haven't had anxiety before, um, or loss of confidence, second guessing ourselves, that kind of thing crops up as well.
So does that mean if I've had anxiety previously, I shouldn't get it again?
So
Here's
you might
hoping.
do. You might do, but I'm hoping you'll have more tools in your
Yes,
toolkit of how to deal with it now than you would have done before. And I think that's
definitely.
always for me the key is one, we need to educate ourselves so we know what's coming up in this period. But then two, let's give women the tools so that yes, if you're all of a sudden struggling with anxiety, you're not then left on your own. You've got some tools to know how to work with it and to
Yeah.
manage it better.
So learn resilience before it happens, basically.
Yes,
That's a
exactly.
great tip. So how do you know when the menopause has actually started, like the perimenopause?
So it is quite tricky. A lot of the women I speak to in coaching, they will say to me, so I'm in my mid 40s, I think I'm perimenopausal. Then when you start to talk about the symptoms they have in, they might go, oh, actually, maybe this started like more like my early 40s when I look back. Because of those things like the lower confidence and the second guessing ourselves, those psychological symptoms, often women don't connect the dots. We just think, oh, I'm busy, or, my skin's got a bit drier, but actually, maybe it's just I'm getting a bit older or whatever. They've not all connected all those dots. So, for many people, it's more when you look back, you see there might be changes earlier than you thought. But for many of us, it is once those symptoms start to ramp up, or we do see the cycle changes. They're like really visible signs for people that that's perimenopause starting.
Okay, that's fair. So what lifestyle changes can you make to ease any symptoms you might get?
So I think the important things with menopause is to remember that because your body is all of a sudden working really hard to regulate its hormones, it might start to struggle where things weren't perfect with your health and lifestyle before. So by that I mean, say your diet isn't quite where it should be, because we all like to drink a bit, maybe smoke a bit,
Eat
don't
the
eat a few more
chocolate.
processed foods, eat a bit of chocolate, exactly, have too many takeaways, all that kind of thing. If we're not looking after ourselves with our diet, um, and what we're eating and drinking, what we might find that before the menopause, the body could deal with that quite effectively, and you didn't see many side effects or symptoms. But actually, when we go through the menopause, because the body's so busy working so hard in other areas, you start to see that the alcohol means that you have more hot flushes or more night sweats that night. Having too much caffeine again might mean that you're a bit more anxious or struggle a bit more with heart palpitations than you would have done before. Or you start to get the hot flushes because you've had caffeine and things like that. So you might see things like that start to crop up. Similarly, if you're not engaged in a regular exercise regime, what happens in menopause because of that hormone change is our body composition changes. So our muscle starts to reduce and our fat stores start to increase. And the fat stores move from around the body towards the tummy area. So if you're not exercising enough, you might start to see all of a sudden the weight starts to creep on quite quickly. And you see that things start to feel a bit more wobbly and not quite as tight as they were before in terms of muscle tone. So it's important for women that we do exercise regularly in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. Not only for that body fat composition, but also because we see issues with osteoporosis. So our risks for osteoporosis increase after menopause because we haven't got that estrogen. So again, strength training is really, really key during our lifespans, and any sort of physical activity, moving around, that kind of thing. So we can do a lot of things with our health and lifestyle. And I always say, I'm not going to say to everybody, you can never have caffeine or chocolate or alcohol again, because that's not a very fun loving life, is it, for many of us? But what I say is play around with your lifestyle. So if you're somebody, and again, I worked with a client whose triggers to hot flushes and night sweats were chocolate and alcohol, and she hated me. She was like, "Oh, I hate you, Bev." She's like, it made me realise that my two favourite things
Yeah.
that I like to have on an evening when I've had a stressful day is a bit of chocolate and a nice glass of white wine at the end of the day. But she decided, because they were having such an impact on her sleep because of her night sweats, that she decided that actually she would only drink on weekends, because on weekends she didn't have to get up for work and she could lay in, or she could have a quiet day, an easy day. She didn't have to get up and actually put the face on, go into the office and pretend everything was okay. And so that's what I always say to people is, if you're struggling with these symptoms and hot flushes and things, see how you can play with your lifestyle so that they don't impact your life quite so much by moving things around a bit.
Yeah. So you've basically how to have a better experience of the menopause, play
Yeah,
around a bit and work out what works for you because everyone's different, I'm
exactly.
guessing.
Everybody's very, very different, and menopause is it, it's something that we all women will go through menopause. Every woman who reaches the age of 50 or 50 odd will go through menopause, but the experience we have of it is very, very unique and different from person to person. And that varies because we all have different lifestyles, we all have different reproductive histories, we all have a different experience of how we think about menopause and aging, all sorts of things that kind of make up this whole experience. So, but what we all can do is feel empowered to make those changes to our lives to kind of make it a bit easier. Or if you need to, get yourself in with the GP and look at treatment options that the GP can offer you as well, because there's also lots of things that way that we can do. But do what works for you and what fits with how you like to manage your life.
Yeah. So my mum went the natural route and didn't take HRT, but HRT comes up quite often. What should we know about HRT if that
So
is something you consider?
yes, so hormone replacement therapy, or HRT. So it's been in the headlines again, recently, and it always keeps coming up into the headlines. It's controversial, and there is divided opinion out there in the medical community. But if it's something you're interested in, it is a safe and effective treatment for many women going through menopause. So if it's something you want to have a look at, have a read up about it, because there's lots of different types. So you can have it as a gel or a patch or a tablet. Um, you can also have it as estrogen only, estrogen and progesterone, depending on where you are in the menopause. And there's also different types and different brands and all sorts of things. One thing I do say about HRT is don't wait until the symptoms are really bad, thinking HRT is always in my back pocket as the last option. Because for some people, they get on with it brilliantly and see symptom changes and, a reduction in symptoms within the first few days or weeks or months of taking it. For other people, they need to go back and forth with the GP to find the right dose and the right type that works for them. And for some people as well, you can take it for as long as you want, but for some people, they might find they need to change their HRT or the dose as they move through the transition as well. So don't just sit there and think, when it gets to crisis point, I'll go to the GP, because one, you can't get in with them for a few weeks anyway, can you? Then you might take a while to get on the right HRT. So don't just sit and wait. Decide to go and investigate that well before you think you're at your last resort and crisis point with it, because it may or may not work for you. Um, that being said, definitely go and have a read around it, see what you think about it, and talk to your GP. You might, when you talk to your GP, need to ask for somebody who's specialist in women's health, on who knows about HRT, because not all GPs are as well skilled in that. And if you don't get the right answer first time, go to another GP. Don't just say, I'm not eligible and it's not for me, and not even try it and sit there struggling with those symptoms.
So, like when I got HRT, my family tend to go down the alternative traditional route. Have you got any ideas about the sort of more traditional type of way?
So again, there's lots of supplements and herbal recipes and things you can take, and there's the health and lifestyle route that we've kind of spoken about, which you can
Yeah,
definitely use as well. Again, just have a read up about the different herbal remedies and things and the more traditional kind of methods before you dive into them. Particularly if you have any other medical conditions, just make sure it doesn't interact with any medication you're already
definitely.
taking. Speak to a GP about that before you go down that route, because there are a few that kind of just stop other medicines from working, which can be quite tricky for people if it's something that needs managed with medication. But yeah, again, have a read about it. There's things like black cohosh, red clover. There's lots of supplements and things on the market nowadays. Again, look at the research evidence for them, because we are seeing more and more products come out in this area that are the same thing but repackaged with menopause on the front of it. So, there's face creams that are now like menopause face cream and menopause hair stuff, and it's no different than what you would have bought, but it's twice the price or three
Yeah,
times the price or whatever.
that's why
So
Tropic's good because it's good for mature skin as well as younger. I love how
exactly,
you
yeah.
mentioned black cohosh though, because my mum basically said the
Did she
secret
use
to
that?
surviving the menopause is evening primrose oil and black cohosh. But she called it black boosh, and I had to find out that it was called cohosh. But yeah, I'm glad you said that because that echoes what my mum's basically said because she went down the traditional route, of course. So, is there anything else you'd like to add? Any tips?
So, biggest tips would be, this is a biological medical like it's a natural transition all us women will go through. So try not to be embarrassed or worried or unduly stressed about it. I know that's really difficult to say, but we need to remember this is puberty in reverse. So whilst we are, and you laugh when I say that, but this truly is
Yeah,
puberty in reverse. So we give our teenagers an awful lot of leeway and support around there as they move through adolescence and puberty, because we know they're quite vile at times, but it's something they have to go through to become adults.
yeah,
And we celebrate that, and it's almost like a rite of passage. And I want us all to try and think the same way about menopause. All right, it's challenging, the symptoms, the things going on that aren't quite so nice at times. But it's something that we all go through as a rite of passage into that older age. And we're privileged if we live long enough to end up in that older age, then we're privileged, aren't we?
yeah.
To kind of reach that point in life. So celebrate it for what it is, as opposed to worrying and feeling embarrassed and everything like that. The symptoms can be embarrassing, but just own them and be like, yeah, I'm going through this, you know. this is how it is. I'm managing it as best I can, but you might need to work with me. And
Yeah.
if I ask for an extra glass of water because I'm having a hot flush in a meeting, or I need to step outside for a moment and just gather myself because I'm having a bit of a panicky moment, just roll with it. That's fine, isn't it? We can work with that.
Yeah. Right. So thanks for talking to me today. How can people find you if they'd like to tap into what you do and work with you?
So I'll add my details so that you've all got them. But I'm on Facebook and I'm on LinkedIn, Dr. Bev Taylor Menopause. Or you can contact me at drbevtaylor@hotmail.com as well if you want to chat to me about anything menopause or psychology related.
Brilliant. So thanks for being my guest today. I hope you've enjoyed our conversation and all the best with your future plans.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Emma Sales, and I'm the sponsor for the October episode of the Tropic Pianist Gamers podcast. The reason I picked October for my episode to sponsor is because it's ADHD Awareness Month, and I'm an ADHD coach and autism coach. If you want to hear more about my story, I was the featured guest in the episode in April of the podcast, so go and listen to that for more information about me. The reason I'm here today is to talk about late diagnosis and potential late diagnosis. Predominantly, I work with adults who are figuring out their own neurodivergence, and they've generally heard a lot on social media, and maybe they've got friends and family or kids that are being diagnosed or have been diagnosed with ADHD or autism, and they just aren't quite sure what to do with the information and where to go with it and who to talk to and how to process it, because it can be a huge identity shift if for most of your life you've been labelled as quirky, or more negative labels such as lazy or distracted and incapable, stupid. It can be really great and really positive and such a relief to get that diagnosis or to think, oh, actually, this could be a thing. But it can also be really challenging, because who even are you if you have a neurodivergent condition? There is a lot of ableism. There is a lot of, but what if it's an excuse? What do I do? How are other people going to react? What's the point of a diagnosis? And I work with people to help them through that process. I have a webinar running on the 17th of October that will be, if you're listening to this after that, available on my website on demand. And that will help people to figure out whether it's worth going for an assessment. So that is why I am here today. I have a few other offers at the moment. I have another webinar in November, which is for parents to figure out whether their child might be neurodivergent and what that might actually look like. I do one-to-one sessions on going deeper into your neurodivergence. So I go through different neurodivergent traits and help you figure out how they apply to you in your life and what strategies you can develop around those traits. And I have a 6-week coaching program called FITS, or From Insecure to Self-Assured, which is to help people understand and accept their neurodivergence in either a group setting or one-to-one. All of the details for all of those things can be found on my website, which is www.emmasalescoaching.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn as Emma Sales, on Facebook as Emma Sales Coach, on Instagram and TikTok as Emma Sales Coaching. This month, I am doing a lot of different traits reels for ADHD and talking about what ADHD looks like. So if you want more information on that, follow me on social media. Thanks very much and enjoy the podcast.